Welcome back, everyone, to the Echoes of Ihsan podcast for another deep dive, exploring Islamic thought and tradition.
Always exciting to dive back into these rich topics.
Yeah, and today we're going to be cracking open a very special book, Imam Malik's Muwatta,
Oh, a classic.
a classic. And we're going to be focusing specifically on book 46, which is all about the decree.
Ah, the decree. Now, that's a concept that's both fascinating and complex at the same time.
It really is. And just a reminder to our listeners before we get started,
Yeah.
this deep dive, it's about exploration. It's not about taking sides or, pushing any particular viewpoint.
Absolutely. Think of us as your guides through this fascinating landscape of Islamic scholarship. We're here to unpack the concepts, highlight the nuances, and hopefully spark some insightful reflections along the way.
Perfect. So listeners, if you're ready to explore the concept of decree, that idea of divine preordainment,
Buckle up.
buckle up because we are going to be jumping right into the heart of it. And what better way to start?
Then with a good old-fashioned theological debate.
Oh, you know me so well. So the very first hadith in book 46 throws us right into this heated conversation between two major figures.
Adam and Musa.
Adam, the first human, and Musa, the prophet Moses. Peace be upon them both.
And let's be honest, this isn't your typical how's the weather kind of chat.
Right.
Musa is essentially throwing some serious shade at Adam, blaming him for humanity's expulsion from paradise.
Talk about awkward dinner conversation, right?
Exactly, but Adam doesn't back down.
No, he doesn't.
He fires back, reminding Musa that Musa himself was chosen by God for prophethood and knowledge, and then comes the knockout punch. Adam asks Musa,
Do you then censure me for a matter which was decreed for me before I was created?
mic drop.
I mean, right?
Yes, you think.
It really makes you think, right?
Mm-hmm.
If even Adam, peace be upon him, was bound by a decree, where does that leave the rest of us?
It's a question that's echoed through Islamic thought for centuries.
For centuries. And that's precisely where this concept of decree gets so intriguing and, let's be honest, a little bit mind-bending.
It really is.
So how do we reconcile this idea of a preordained plan with our own sense of free will and responsibility?
Right. How do our choices even matter?
If God already knows the script, are we just actors playing out our roles?
It's a question that Islamic scholars have grappled with for centuries.
It really is a tough one.
There's a spectrum of interpretations, and within that spectrum, there are some really insightful perspectives.
Yeah, so let's unpack some of those nuances.
Let's do it.
So one thing that often comes up in discussions about decree is the idea of God's absolute knowledge.
Right. Imagine this God, in his infinite wisdom, knows everything.
Everything.
Not just what has happened and what is happening, but also everything that will happen. Every choice we'll make, every path we'll take.
It's all known to him.
It's already known to him.
Okay, I'm starting to see where this whole free will question gets a little sticky.
Yeah.
If God already knows everything, doesn't that mean our choices are predetermined?
That's where it gets really interesting. See, in Islamic theology, God's attributes are not mutually exclusive. Just because God has foreknowledge, it doesn't negate our ability to choose.
Hold on, I need a second to wrap my head around this.
Sure.
How can both be true at the same time? It's like saying a coin can land on heads and tails simultaneously.
It can be tricky. That's why sometimes analogies can be helpful, but we have to be careful not to take them too literally.
Right.
Think of it this way. Imagine you're watching a movie for the second time. You already know what's going to happen, right? But that doesn't change the fact that the characters in the movie are still making choices, still experiencing the story as it unfolds.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see God knows the entire movie of our lives,
Yeah.
but we're still the actors making choices within that narrative.
Exactly. And those choices, while perhaps known to God beforehand, are still very real to us. They shape our character, our experiences, and ultimately our journey towards our final destination.
Which brings us to the next hadith in book 46, where the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, explains the creation of Adam and his progeny.
Mm-hmm.
And he describes how some are destined for paradise and others for hellfire.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? God strokes Adam's back, and from that act, all of humanity emerges. But it also raises that persistent question, if our destiny is already determined, right, what's the point of striving?
If it's all set in stone, why bother making an effort?
Well, that's where the Prophet Muhammad's clarification comes in. He emphasizes that while destiny exists, individuals still act according to their inherent nature,
Okay.
leading them towards their ultimate destination.
So it's like a seed
Exactly.
that has the potential to grow into a specific type of plant.
Right.
But the environment and care it receives can influence its growth.
Absolutely.
But its fundamental nature remains.
Precisely.
So we're not just passively floating along, waiting for our pre-written fate to play out.
Nope.
We actually have a role to play in shaping our lives.
We are active participants making choices, cultivating our character, and ultimately contributing to the unfolding of our own stories.
Okay, but this still leaves me with a nagging question.
Mm.
You know, if we know that our destiny is preordained, does it make our good deeds any less meaningful?
It's a question that many people grapple with, but think about it this way. Imagine you have a friend who loves to paint. They spend hours creating beautiful artwork, pouring their heart and soul into each brushstroke.
Right.
Now imagine someone comes along and says, hey, those paintings are nice, but they're just blobs of paint on canvas. They don't really matter.
Right.
Would that diminish your friend's passion for painting?
No way. The joy of creating the expression of their talent that wouldn't disappear just because someone tried to devalue their work.
Exactly. And in a similar way, our good deeds, our efforts to live a righteous life, are not diminished by the existence of a preordained plan. In fact, they become even more meaningful because they reflect our alignment with God's will,
Right.
our desire to fulfill our potential, and our love for the one who's bestowed upon us the gift of life.
I love that. So it's not about negating our efforts, but about understanding them within a larger context.
That's it.
And speaking of understanding within a larger context, the next hadith we encounter offers us some guidance on how to navigate this whole complex landscape of decree. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, emphasizes the importance of adhering to the Quran and his sunnah,
Right.
his traditions and practices.
Our guidepost.
So it's like having a map and compass
Yes.
to guide us through this vast terrain of life,
Yes.
even if the destination is already known.
Precisely. The Quran and the Sunnah provide principles, values, and practical guidance for living a righteous life.
Right.
They illuminate the path towards spiritual growth and fulfillment.
And even though our final destination may be known to God, the journey itself is filled with opportunities for learning, growth, and drawing closer to the divine.
Absolutely. And this is where human agency truly shines. We have the ability to seek knowledge, strive for righteousness, and make choices that align with divine guidance.
It's a reminder that our actions, though perhaps part of a larger cosmic plan, hold immense weight in shaping our character and our experience of this world.
They do.
And this brings us to a rather bold statement found in the next hadith. The companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, declare, everything is by decree, including incapacity and ability.
That's a powerful statement.
It really is. Now, this statement might initially seem like it completely negates human agency. If everything, even our ability or inability to do something, is decreed, then where does our free will fit in?
Right, that's a common misconception. It's crucial to understand that decree doesn't negate human agency. Instead, it emphasizes God's ultimate knowledge and control over all events. It acknowledges that nothing happens outside of God's will.
So it's not about denying our ability to choose, but about recognizing a higher power at play.
Exactly. Think of it like an author writing a novel. The author knows the entire story, the character's motivations, and the ultimate outcome. However, the characters within the story still make choices that drive the plot forward. Their choices matter even though the author has a predetermined ending in mind.
That's a helpful analogy.
Yeah.
So how might this understanding of decree affect one's approach to challenges and successes?
Well, it can foster a sense of humility and acceptance. We recognize that we are not in complete control of every aspect of our lives.
Right.
There are factors beyond our grasp, and that's okay. It also encourages trust in God's plan. Even when faced with the difficulties, we can find solace in knowing that God is aware and that there is a purpose behind our trials.
It's about surrendering to a higher wisdom while still striving to fulfill our potential.
Precisely. It's a balance between acknowledging God's power and recognizing our own responsibility.
And this brings us to a hadith that addresses a very specific situation, but offers profound insights into the concept of preordained provision. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, discourages a woman from seeking the divorce of another woman so she can marry the husband.
That's right. This hadith emphasizes the idea that one receives what is decreed regardless of manipulative actions. The woman in this scenario is essentially trying to force a situation to unfold in a way that benefits her. However, the Prophet Muhammad reminds her that her provision, including her marriage, is already determined by God.
It's a powerful reminder that we can't manipulate or outsmart God's plan.
We can't. We may strive for what we desire, but ultimately we receive what is destined for us.
And this concept is further emphasized in another hadith where Muawiyah,
Yes.
a companion of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, states the futility of striving against Allah's will.
It's very clear.
It seems that accepting God's decree requires a deep level of trust and surrender.
It does. It's about acknowledging that God's wisdom surpasses our own limited understanding.
This brings us to a beautiful prayer mentioned in the Muwatta. It
Yes.
expresses praise for God's control over all things, acknowledging his power to determine the timing of events and affirming his sufficiency.
What a beautiful prayer.
It really is. It beautifully encapsulates the essence of believing in decree. It reflects a profound sense of awe and submission to God's will.
Yes, a recognition that he is the ultimate planner and provider.
And it's a reminder that even though you may not always understand the reasons behind events, we can find peace in trusting God's plan.
A reminder that he has our best interests at heart even when we can't see it.
So how might this belief in decree impact our decision-making, and our acceptance of outcomes in our daily lives?
Right, that's a great question. Knowing that God has a plan can free us from anxiety and worry. We can strive to make the best choices, trusting that God will guide us towards what is best for us.
So it doesn't mean becoming passive or resigning ourselves to fate.
No, not at all.
It's about recognizing that God's plan encompasses both our efforts and the outcomes.
Precisely. It's a delicate balance between striving and surrendering, between action and acceptance.
And this brings us to the final hadith we'll explore in this part of our deep dives. It states that no one dies until their provision is complete, encouraging right action and seeking sustenance.
Such an important reminder that our efforts matter. Even though our provision is preordained, we are still expected to seek it through lawful means, to work diligently, and to be responsible stewards of what God has given us.
So understanding the concept of decree doesn't negate our responsibility or diminish the value of our efforts. Instead, it adds a layer of meaning and purpose to our actions.
It redefines our relationship with our actions, encouraging us to see them as a form of worship and a way of aligning ourselves with God's will.
So it's a call to action within the framework of acceptance.
Exactly, a call to strive with trust, surrender with purpose, and live with a deep awareness of God's presence and plan in our lives.
It's a beautiful and empowering way to approach life. And with that, we're going to take a little break and come back to delve a little deeper into this fascinating concept of decree in Islam.
Looking forward to it. And we're back, folks, continuing our deep dive into the profound concept of decree in Islam.
As we were going through that first part, I just kept thinking how much this idea of decree really challenges our typical notions of control.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, we as human beings, we like to think we're in the driver's seat, calling all the shots, but decree kind of throws a wrench in that whole idea.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because at first glance, it might seem like a very passive concept, right? Like if everything is already decided, what's the point of even trying?
I can see how someone might think that, but when you really delve into the deeper layers of this belief, it actually becomes quite liberating.
Liberating. How so?
Well, think about it this way. If you truly believe that God has a plan that's rooted in infinite wisdom and mercy, then surrendering to that plan can actually lift a huge burden from your shoulders.
So instead of feeling trapped by fate,
You find freedom in trusting a higher power.
okay, I'm starting to see how that shift in perspective can be really powerful.
It is. It allows us to let go of that need to control every little detail of our lives. We can focus on our efforts, on doing our best, while recognizing that the ultimate outcome rests in God's hands.
It's like trusting that the universe has our back.
In a way, yes. It's about recognizing that we're not alone in this journey, that there's a force greater than ourselves that's guiding and supporting us.
But doesn't that kind of go against the idea of free will?
That's a question that's been debated for centuries, But I think it's important to remember that God's attributes, they don't contradict each other. Just because God has a plan doesn't mean we don't have the ability to choose.
So it's not a case of either. It's both hands.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our choices matter even though they exist within the context of God's greater plan. It's like an author writing a book. The author knows the ending, but the characters still have to make choices that drive the story forward.
So we're not just puppets on strings.
No, not at all. We're active participants in the unfolding of our lives. Our choices matter. Our actions have consequences. But all of that is happening within the framework of God's knowledge and will.
And this brings us back to that key question that we keep coming back to. How do we reconcile this idea of a preordained plan with our own sense of agency and responsibility?
It's a balancing act for sure, but I think the key lies in understanding that God's plan doesn't negate our efforts. It actually enhances them. When we act with the awareness that we're cooperating with God's will, it gives our actions a whole new level of meaning and purpose.
So it's not about being passive or just sitting back and letting things happen to us.
Not at all. It's about acting with intention and purpose, knowing that our efforts are part of something much bigger than yourselves.
And that our efforts matter.
Absolutely. They matter immensely. Not because they can change God's plan, but because they shape our character, they refine our souls, and they allow us to grow closer to the divine.
I love that. So understanding decree isn't about giving up control. It's about surrendering to a higher wisdom and finding freedom within that surrender.
Beautifully put. It's about recognizing that God's plan is not meant to limit us, but to guide us, to protect us, and to ultimately lead us to our highest good.
And to help us fulfill our unique potential.
Precisely. It's about aligning our will with God's will and trusting that in that alignment we'll find true peace fulfillment and a deep sense of purpose.
So what are some practical ways that this understanding of decree can show up in our daily lives?
Well, I think one of the most important implications is that it can free us from a lot of anxiety and worry. When we face challenges or setbacks, we can find solace in knowing that God is aware of our situation and that He has a plan for us.
So instead of getting caught up in the why me,
We can focus on the what now.
and on trusting that even in the midst of difficulty, God is with us.
Absolutely. It also encourages us to approach our goals with a different mindset. Instead of being driven by fear or desperation, we can strive for excellence out of a desire to please God and to fulfill the potential He's placed within us.
So it's not about striving out of a sense of lack or scarcity,
Yeah.
but out of a sense of abundance and gratitude.
Exactly. And when we operate from that place, our efforts become more aligned with our true purpose, and we're less likely to get caught up in the ups and downs of life,
So it's about finding that sweet spot between effort and acceptance,
between action and surrender.
between striving for what we want
Yeah.
and trusting that God will provide what we need.
Yeah, beautifully said. And it's in that delicate balance that we truly find freedom and fulfillment.
As you're talking, I'm just thinking about all the different ways that this belief can impact our relationships with others, too.
That's such an important point. When we understand that everyone is operating within the framework of God's decree, it cultivates a sense of compassion and understanding. We're less likely to judge or blame others because we recognize that their actions are part of a larger plan that we may not fully comprehend.
It's like remembering that everyone is on their own unique journey and that our paths may intersect in ways that we could never have imagined.
Exactly. And when we approach our interactions with that awareness, it fosters a sense of harmony and interconnectedness. We can appreciate the diversity of human experiences without feeling the need to control or change them.
So it's about embracing the tapestry of life with all its complexities and imperfections.
And recognizing that within those imperfections lies a profound beauty and wisdom.
And that even the most difficult experiences can serve as opportunities for growth and transformation.
Absolutely. When we view life through the lens of decree, it allows us to see challenges as tests, opportunities to refine our character and strengthen our faith.
So it's not about avoiding hardship, but about learning from it and growing through it.
And trusting that God is with us every step of the way, guiding us, supporting us, and ultimately leading us towards our highest good.
This has been such an insightful exploration. I feel like we've just scratched the surface of this profound concept.
We have. There's so much more to unpack and reflect on. But hopefully this conversation has sparked some new insights and inspired you to delve deeper into this fascinating aspect of Islamic thought.
Absolutely. Now, before we move on to our final segment, I just want to touch on one more hadith that really resonated with me. It's the one where Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan states that nothing keeps away what Allah gives, and nothing gives what Allah keeps away. The earnestness of the earnest one does not profit him. When Allah desires good for him, He gives him understanding in the deen.
Such wise words. They really highlight the absolute power and control of God over all affairs and the importance of aligning our efforts with His will.
It's a reminder that ultimately success in this life and the next is not determined by our own striving, but by God's grace and guidance.
And that when we surrender to His will and seek His pleasure, we open ourselves up to receiving the blessings and guidance that He has in store for us.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between effort and surrender, between striving for what we want and trusting in God's plan.
And recognizing that true success lies in aligning our hearts and actions with the divine will.
I love that. So as we move into our final segment, let's keep this beautiful reminder in mind and see how it can further enhance our understanding of decree and its practical implications in our lives.
And we're back. Ready to wrap up our deep dive into the concept of decree, as explored in Muwatta Imam Malik, Book 46.
I think one of the most beautiful aspects of this concept is that it invites us to surrender to a power greater than ourselves.
Yes, to recognize that we're not in control of everything.
And that can be really scary for some people.
It can, but it can also be incredibly liberating.
Liberating how?
Because when we let go of that need to control every outcome, we open ourselves up to a whole new level of peace and trust. It's like we're saying to God, I trust in your plan, even if I don't fully understand it.
And that kind of surrender takes a lot of faith.
It does, but it's a faith that's deeply rooted in the belief that God is all-knowing, all-wise, and all-merciful.
So we're not just surrendering to some unknown force.
You're surrendering to a loving and compassionate creator who wants what's best for us.
And who has a plan for us that's far greater than anything we could ever imagine on our own.
Exactly. And that's where the real beauty of decree lies. It's not about limiting our potential, but about guiding us towards our highest good.
And sometimes that guidance comes in ways that we don't expect or even understand in the moment.
Right. Sometimes the path that God has chosen for us might look very different from the path we had envisioned for ourselves.
But ultimately, it's the path that will lead us to our greatest fulfillment and happiness.
And it's in those moments of surrender, when we let go of our own limited perspective and embrace God's plan, that we truly experience the power and the beauty of decree.
It's like we're stepping into a flow that's bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And trusting that the current will carry us exactly where we need to be.
So how can we cultivate this kind of trust in our daily lives?
I think it starts with recognizing that we're not in control. That's the first step. And then from there, it's about making a conscious effort to align our will with God's will.
And that alignment might look different for each person.
It will. For some people, it might be about dedicating themselves to prayer and spiritual practice. For others, it might be about using their talents and gifts to serve others. It's about finding what resonates with your heart and what allows you to feel connected to something bigger than yourself.
And it's about trusting that even in the midst of difficulty or uncertainty, God is with us every step of the way.
Absolutely. The Quran reminds us that with every difficulty comes ease. So even when things get tough, we can find comfort in knowing that God is always there to support us and to guide us through.
And that's such a powerful reminder, because let's face it, life is full of ups and downs. There are going to be times when we face challenges and setbacks.
Of course, and that's where our faith and decree can really come into play. It's in those moments of difficulty that we can choose to either resist God's plan or to surrender to it.
And surrendering doesn't mean giving up or becoming passive.
No, it means trusting that God has a bigger picture in mind and that he's working everything out for our ultimate good.
So it's about finding that balance between striving and surrender,
Between action and acceptance.
between doing our part and trusting in God's plan.
Exactly. It's about living with that beautiful awareness that we are co-creators with the divine.
That we have a role to play in shaping our lives, but that ultimately the outcome rests in God's hands.
And it's in that space of co-creation that we can truly experience the magic and the mystery of life.
And the profound peace that comes from knowing that we are loved, guided, and supported every step of the way.
So may we all strive to live with that awareness and to embrace the beauty and the wisdom of decree.
And with that, we come to the end of our deep dive into this profound concept. Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration, and may your hearts be filled with peace, understanding, and a deep connection to the divine.
Until next time, may God bless you all.